to wait.
Okay. We'll wait another minute. Oh, I'm nervous. I've never done a webinar before.
Oh, you'll be fine.
Hosted one anyway. I've been on one, but
you'll be fine. You've got to start somewhere.
Cool. Should we kick off then? It's 1 minute past now.
Yep, I'm happy to kick off.
Okay, so hi all. Welcome to the webinar covering HMO design, management and systems with myself and Julian Maurice. I'm your host, Nick Leatherland. I'm the director of Pegasus Property Group, which is a development company based in Stoke-on-Trent. We do HMOs, commercial to residential conversions, and new builds around Staffordshire and Cheshire. We incorporated in around February 2015, so we've been going for about 20 months. And in that time, we have sourced and renovated around 25 HMOs for our clients. We also run a letting agency, which is systemised and paperless. I also run a property community unity project, which currently has over 35 members. It's subscription-based, and we have a monthly in-person expert seminars, which is mastermind sessions as well. So, Julian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, there's somebody graffitiing all over the screen, by the way. That's not me.
I don't
know who that is. There we go. Right, okay, me. I guess I am I am a kind of contractor, really. I've been renovating properties since 2002. Before that, I was in property and doing other things, rentals. And since 2012, I've been investing in property myself. So I guess I'm more of a landlord than anything. I do. I'm a bit of a. I guess I've got my USP is that I like interior design, and I focus a lot on design. I help people with interior design. I take workshops in interior design, and I work with developers, helping them specify projects. So that's my thing. I'm a different approach, I guess. Yeah.
Cool. Nice one. So hopefully, I think I might have fixed the drawing thing. We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, cool. So moving on. So we go on to slide number 2 now. So we're going to discuss HMO design, HMO technology, and how to control heating, some management and systems, as well as some top tips from me and Julian. And there's going to be a Q&A at the end as well. So if you've got any questions you want to ask, just leave them to the end. So we get straight into this. We're going to HMO design. So some of the best properties I've seen are ones where the project has been well thought out from the word go. So that's quite common practice. What's quite common is that you actually find a project, you get the builder into quote, and then he cracks on with the work. And at the end, you're just left with whatever spec the builder felt like doing. They don't take much direction from the client. They just kind of get on with it. So sometimes you get plug sockets in random locations. Sometimes they end up being behind furniture, so you can't actually use them. So what I tend to do is quite simple. I've got this Stanley laser measurer, so that cost me about £60, and I got that from Screwfix. Basically, you can just measure the length and width of the room, and it's also quite good because you can press units here. You can get the volume, so you can just do the width, length, and it'll tell you the total volume of the room. So when I'm doing HMOs, that's perfect. So I want to know what the minimum room sizes are. Obviously, the minimum room size is 6.5 square meters. So I know that an ensuite is typically 2.5 to 3 square meters. So if I'm walking around a property that I want to do all ensuites in, I'm measuring this and I'm going, right, this reception room is 13 square meters minus 3. So it's going to work as a 10 square meter bedroom with the ensuite extra sort of thing. So it's quite cool for that. So essentially, I take these measurements and I put them into Floor Planner. So Floor Planner is the software that I use. So I'm just going to stop my screen share a sec, and then I'm going to share my desktop. So you should all be able to see. That now. Do you see that, Julian?
I see that.
Great. So this is Floor Planner. So on Floor Planner, what you can do is you can basically just draw a room like that, and it tells you the measurements, and you drop it. You can stick doors in, so you can put doors in. You can change the door measurements as well, make them smaller, bigger, whatever you want to do. Put windows in, things like that. So that's pretty cool. And then you can furnish it as well. So you can put your furniture in, so you can drop beds in. You can change the bed size, make it a single, double, small double, whatever you want to do. And basically, you can do that. So I'm going to show you one that I made earlier. So this is what it looks like. So this is the first floor in a 6-bedroom HMO. So I've put all the room measurements in, all the en-suites, etc., etc. And I can enable 3D mode. So that just takes 1 second to do. Once that's enabled, that actually allows me to look around the property. And I can also drop the wall heights so I can see the rooms a little bit better. So this for me is quite important in my HMO design because I'm figuring out where all the furniture is going to go before I've even started renovating. So I know I want a plug socket there for the lamp. I know I want the TV point there for that TV. It's all worked out from the word go. And I literally give this to my builder, or I walk around with a can of spray paint and I spray paint on all the walls where I want everything to go. So that's a little tip from myself. Julian, have you got anything that you want to share with
the
design aspect?
First of all, I would say that that's I can't add anything more to that from a kind of, I guess, from a procedural point of view. I think that I think you're doing things in a really good way. If you're okay with me to just add a couple of points that on my perspective, if that's okay. Can I share screen?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, so if you click share screen, and then if you can either share your desktop, everyone can see your desktop, or you can specific program.
The only thing is, it says that host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I'm not sure whether that's possible or not. So I'll tell you what, I don't have to share my screen, but what I would like to do is just
try it now. I've just enabled it again.
Oh, have you? Okay. All right. Well, let me just find this. So I'll show you what I do. Where do I go? Yeah. So can you see my screen here? And I'm showing you principles of good design. Can you see that? Hang on. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. So I've looked at. I've got inspiration, and this kind of is a separate thing, but it does cover things like property design. But I've taken inspiration from somebody that I think is possibly one of the most legendary commercial designers ever. A guy called Dieter Rams, and Apple have used a lot of his. Well, they basically copy pretty much everything that he's ever done. And so, if Apple have copied what he does, then I guess if I can be influenced by that, then it's got to work well. So Dieter Rams, he created these 10 principles of good design. And I kind of check back on these all the time. And actually, I've found that if you try to apply these in your design, then it somehow miraculously turns into something really good. So, I'll just run through these principles if I've got a second, if you're all right with that.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, happy.
So you've got good design is innovative, and I remember speaking to you about innovation. The hard part with design is trying to be innovative rather than just copy people. But if you do try to be innovative, then you are going to stay ahead of the game. And then you've got good design makes a product useful. So what you've said about putting plug sockets in the right place is making that product useful, so that when somebody moves in, rather than have to pull a cabinet forward to get to a plug, it's actually for me, I'll put them above the tabletop, so that when they're in bed they can reach over and just plug their phone in, or I'll put them above a desk, so that if they've got a laptop on the desk, they don't have to run the cable underneath the desk to plug it in, etc. So that's making a product useful. Aesthetic, well, it's got to look good. If it doesn't look good, then people aren't going to click on it and to buy it. Is it understandable? There's some of these things that I'll brush over, but the main one for me is making a product long lasting. So when you apply design to that principle, so is the design long lasting? For me, it's about not making something look too current, and just making sure the design is fairly simple, so that it doesn't age, it doesn't look dated after about 5 years. So I do think very carefully about that side of things, and also about durability as well. But if we're looking at, I guess, what was it, HMO? We're talking about HMO design, so it doesn't actually necessarily have to just cover the floor plan. But it covers lots of different things. I think the main thing for me is durability of the design itself. So I have seen a lot of people really go crazy on design at the moment and making it look like a inside of a factory or something. Well, that's all well and good, but to be honest with you, that to me is over designing the product, so that in a few years' time, when that industrial look is no longer fashionable, it's like doing a Laura Ashley interior, I guess. I would never do something that's that over designed, because it will date. So for me, it's about durability, aesthetics, and usefulness, making it user friendly. And if we're talking about plans, well, I'm not as on the ball as you are with drawings, and I don't know whether you can see my screen when I go to show you my drawings, but I use Photoshop actually to create drawings. I can bring up. So can you see my whole screen here? Can you see me opening?
I can see your browser. Yeah.
Okay, so if I look at layout drawings, what I tend to do, I mean, if I'm talking about procedure, what I will do if I'm going to be doing what you're doing, which is adding rooms, en suites, etc., I'll actually get a surveyor to come out and do me a set of accurate site drawings. And while he's there, what I'll ask him to do is to let me know what needs building regs approval, so that while he's doing the drawings, he can actually do the building regs applications as quickly as possible, so that when the property comes to completion, I've got all the relevant approvals in place. So that tends to be how I do things. I'll play around with the drawings after the surveyor's done them, but I've got them all to scale, and I'll pay him 300 quid to do the drawings. It's mainly because of the building regs applications.
We can't see your floor plans. We can just see the.
Okay. So if I was going to show you my floor plans, let me just show you my one. So if I go to, just hang on a second, can you see my folders coming up?
Yeah, I can see Dieter Rams Design Legend.
Okay. Let me just bring up my site drawings. So just bear with me a second.
Sure.
Julian's Photoshop plans here. So I've got Photoshop. Bear with me a second. PSD. Yeah. So here we go. So let me just hang on. Here we go. So basically, what I've done. Can you see my drawings here?
Yeah, I can see them now.
So what I've done is I've cheated. I've taken. This was before the surveyor went on site. I've used the estate agent's drawings and just used Photoshop to overlay stuff over the top.
Yeah.
And I've put in where I want the lights, what type of lights I want, where the light switches go, where the radiators go, where the beds go. I put in built-in furniture, so I kind of show that, where the gas meter is, where the sofa is, and everything is done pretty much to scale. And then I hand that to the surveyor when he goes around, so he knows pretty much what I want, and then he can go, okay, we need building regs approval for that, we need building regs approval for that, and he can then do the applications. So that's kind of pretty much how I do it, and I do that for every floor. And the thing is, when I've done this, is even if you've planned it down to the smallest detail, when the work starts, there's always stuff that comes up that makes you have to think about things again and move things. So giving yourself that time to make those changes and have these drawings means that you can work on the fly as and when things come up, because nothing ever goes according to plan when you do a project. But
so we're both using quite similar methods, aren't we? As in, you're using Photoshop to get the estate agent's drawings, for example, and actually drawing over them what you want, and then I'm basically going around and measuring it up with the laser measurer. Then I'm obviously, so your method's probably a lot quicker than mine, because
if you know how to use Photoshop. If you don't know how to use Photoshop, then your method is actually better.
This probably takes me 20 minutes to measure up, and then also it probably takes me another 30 minutes on floor planner to put all of everything in place. But I guess what's nice about the floor planner thing is that I can actually have a cup of tea and I can sit there and I can mess around, and I can give it to my client, for example, and they can actually come back to me and say, I don't like that, I don't like that, and we can actually change it all. But obviously that's totally the same with you, for sure. What's quite cool with floor planner is that I can actually do it live, so I can actually screen share somebody in on Zoom like this now, and I can actually say, right, what do you want the door move into that place? What do you think of that now? So we're both using quite similar methods in that respect. But I think the key point to take away from this is that we're both thinking about the end product at the very beginning. So we're thinking about where the furniture's going, so where the plug sockets are going to go, where the TV points are going to go, where the lights are going to go. All these little things are really important because, like I alluded to earlier, you know, when I started doing HMOs back in the day, I didn't really think about this. I just said to my builder, crack on. I want a white kitchen and I want this tile in the bathroom, and that was it. I didn't really give any more instructions other than that. And I ended up with plug sockets all over the place. And, you know, I was putting wardrobes in front of plug sockets because that's the only place they could go. So I just want to ask you a quick question actually about something. So it got me thinking. So there's a lot of people doing HMOs right now. However, I'm finding that people are just throwing a lot of money at the projects, as in they're just throwing a lot of money at the finish. They're putting fancy ornaments in and they're putting nice dressings in. But actually, we're achieving a nice finish, but without spending the money, because we're putting time instead of money into. I mean, time is money, but we're spending a lot of time thinking about the design from the beginning, as opposed to other people who aren't really thinking about the design aspect. They're just throwing a lot of money at the finish.
I think adding to that,
it's bullshit stuff, isn't it? Like jacuzzi showers and baths and like big flat screen TVs and like 4K TVs, and it's kind of like gimmicky a little bit. That's how I feel.
Well, the only thing I can add to that, and I don't disagree with you, is that if you're looking at durability, which is what I really think about, is it's the stuff on the surface isn't the stuff that makes a product durable. It's the quality of the workmanship, and it's the way everything has been laid out so that it's future proof, and that it's easily upgradable in the future. It can be easy to maintain. If I might not be able to get as much rent off the starting gate because I've not put in a 4K TV, fair enough. But in 10 years' time, when they've got lots of maintenance issues and things are falling off of walls, then mine will still be steady away. So I guess it's more tortoise and the hare situation where, you know, I'm not in a race to start off and rush off straight away. I'd rather have a much more even and steady cash flow system. And that's down to durability, totally.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree with that. Doing a project where you can actually upgrade it easily is really important. And I think that as a business, you need to try and not race to the bottom, basically, which is what a lot of people do. They race to the bottom by throwing more money at it to the point where it's not a commercially viable business anymore. So, you know, putting in a couple nice features which are long lasting and going to look good and give it wow factor, but without being gimmicky, basically. I think that's really the way to go. And you do that
simplicity.
And you do that by spending more time on the design as opposed to
indeed
throwing money at it instead, which is what the point is I was trying to make. So
yeah, I think it was Terence Conran that said good design is 98% common sense, and the rest of it is a lot of hard work and a lot of thought and time and attention to detail. And it's not easy to create a well-designed product. It takes time, and I think that's the key thing. You know, if you plan things in good time, then you are leaving yourself that time to think things through properly and to go back to people and for people to come back to you and to make little changes and tweaks. And it is down to time. And when I've done work for investors over the years, I've never had anyone come to me with a set of drawings or with a set of specifications, or it's normally an exchange of contracts, or when they're just about to complete, I've been bought in and they've gone, Julian, right, have a good look around, let me know what you think and give me a ballpark figure. And that's really been the amount of instructions that I've been getting. So I think if you want to professionalize what you're doing, give yourself time. Cool.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next thing then. So the next thing is implementing technology into HMOs. So this webinar is about HMO design. It's about implementing technologies, and it's also about management and systems. So after this section, we're going to go on to management and systems. Right, starting off. So I want to talk to you about implementing technologies into HMOs. So one of my favourite things right now is actually heating control. So you aren't allowed to lock a thermostat away. That's the law, basically. You're not allowed to take the control away from the tenants. That's not allowed. But if you use a smart thermostat, which can be controlled via a phone app or a website, it connects through Wi-Fi. So essentially, you can have a thermostat like Hive, for example, and you can control the heating. So there's some really cool thermostats out there. So a lot of them have been around for a few years now. So Hive by British Gas is a really popular one. But there's also thermostats out there like Inspire Home Automation, and they do a landlord version. That means that it's actually locked, but you have a boost function on it. So the tenant can access the thermostat, so it's legal, and they can control the heating on it as well by boosting it. So it's also legal. However, the boost is within a set parameter, and you set that parameter basically. So you can take charge of your heating. So the house needs to be at minimum temperatures. So the minimum temperature for a bedroom is 18 degrees Celsius, and for a living room is 21 degrees Celsius. So if you are controlling the heating through these smart thermostats, ensure that you are hitting those minimum temperatures. And like it says on the slide, it stops you from getting big, scary bills. So I've been using this heating system called Heat Genius, which I'd really highly recommend. So it's a smart thermostat again, like Inspire Home Automation. However, it's also got lots of really cool add-ons as well. So you can have multiple thermostats, which will create zones. So for example, in a small 4-bed HMO, I'd probably just use one thermostat. That would be sufficient. Whilst in a large 5 to 6 bed HMO, I'd probably do one on the ground floor and one on the first floor as well. So if you're doing a larger HMO, say 7 to 8 bedrooms, you can expand the system by having PIR sensors, which are motion sensors, which are located in bedrooms. So that means if a tenant leaves the room, then the heating will turn off. It's all within set parameters as well. It saves loads on gas, up to 40%. It's a really cool piece of kit, so I'll definitely check it out. So I just wanted to talk about Heat Genius basically for 2 minutes. Julian, I know you use thermostats as well, smart thermostats. Have you got anything you want to add?
The only question I had is with your PIRs, what if someone's asleep and they're not moving?
Well, actually, if you combine the PIR sensor with the TRV, so the TRV can be on every single rad in the house, and every single rad can be individually controlled by you and by the tenant as well. So it actually knows when you're in the room, because of obviously moving around. Like you said, if you're asleep, you have a minimum set temperature, so it won't drop below that minimum set temperature anyway. Obviously, you don't want the temperature going to like 1 degree Celsius, so a tenant walks in for work and they're bloody freezing cold, because that would be crap, right? So the point is that when they're in the room, they can knock it up to 25 degrees whilst they're there, or whatever you set it to. When they leave, it'll go back down to the minimum requirement, which will stop your house from getting mouldy because it won't be freezing cold. It's also got some other added features as well, like if you open the window, it knows that there's a rapid heat loss and it will turn the heating off.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I think that's the main cause of problems with these.
Another thing it does, which is really cool, is that if you use an electric heater in the room, it knows that there's a foreign heating object in the room. So it will actually notify you to say that the heating somehow is gone above what you've set it to. So there must be something else in that room that's causing heat. So you can then contact the tenant and say, hey, what are you playing at? I mean, you can have a fair usage policy in your contract to say that they can't, if they use more electricity than the allowance, you can charge them. But whether it's actually enforceable or not is really debatable. It's basically not enforceable, technically, but you can scare them with it. So the best thing you can do is obviously control, because as a HMO landlord, you're probably paying for gas and electricity. The electricity aspect is kind of okay. People charging phones, laptops, watching TV, that's all acceptable. But when you throw a heating fan in there, boom, the electricity bill, is going to be mental. So if you've got heating controls in all the bedrooms, don't get me wrong, this system costs a few quid. I mean, we did a 10-bed HMO and it cost about £2,500 for the full system. However, 40% savings on gas on a 10-bed HMO, make your money back within a year or two, and you're going to have it for 20, 30 years cash flowing. You know, it's well worth the money.
Yeah, well, I tend to stick with smaller HMOs, so I've really not had the need for this Genie system. But definitely, if I was going for a larger HMO, I would definitely go for that type of system, purely because I've been using the smaller system and it's been really effective. So I've been using the Inspire home automation system, and I really just like the fact that I can keep full control of what's going on, and it does a similar thing. So if I can check back to see how the boilers are performing. If the thermostat's constantly calling for heat, I know that somebody's leaving windows open. It'll alert me if the property's gone over a certain temperature. It'll alert me when somebody's boosted the temperature. It alerts me when the batteries are low, all sorts of stuff like that. So, I had a nightmare with somebody playing around with an old thermostat a while back, and that cost me, it cost me probably a few £100 in terms of excess payments on bills. It was crazy, and that's not necessary. So I think if you want to keep control of things, if you are covering your bills, then every penny counts, and investing at the at the offset in something that's going to allow you to keep control of things. And I think for me, I'd invest in that, and which I have been doing. So yeah. And your system is for larger HMOs. I think the Inspire has been very good for me for the smaller ones. And also the good thing about the Inspire one is you can put as many properties as you like on one dashboard. So you can just click a button and you can go between all the different properties, and you can just copy and paste the settings from one property to another. And I've just found it really good. It very rarely trips up. The only time I get a problem is when stupid bloody internet companies tell the tenants to unplug the heating system when there's an internet slowdown. But then I get notified and then they plug it back in again. But no, it's been really good, and I really recommend them. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, that's basically what I want to talk about with regards to implementing technologies into HMOs. I know there's loads of other stuff out there, like security systems and lock systems and all the rest of it, but I want to cover quite a few subjects this evening, so I don't want to go way too much into that. But if you look at the chat over on the right-hand side, those people are saying things. Phil Sadler's saying he's using Nest. Craig.
I've heard people asking about Nest. Can I butt in about this? Because Nest isn't really a system for landlords. Nest is just basically a thermostat that you can, remember those old ones that used to just turn up the volume and turn down the volume? Mm-hmm. Well, to me, that's what the Nest is. It's just a volume control system. And yes, you can have an app on your phone. So if somebody's put it up to 27 degrees, you can go, I'll turn it back down again. But, it's not really designed for landlords. You've got to, I think, if you are going to invest in one of these systems, then find a system that is designed for landlords. Don't just go and buy a domestic product. It's not the same thing, and it won't say. I don't think it would actually save you any money doing it that way. So what? You can set the maximum temperature on Nest. Okay, someone's obviously using it and saying you can set the max temperature. Okay, fair enough. But
it's still the point's still there, Julian. That Hive and Nest, etc., isn't really made for landlords as such, and it still works in the basic sense that one thermostat in a lounge or something, away you go. But if you're doing bigger HMOs, I'd even argue that 5-bed, 6-bed plus, you should be zoning it anyway, because in my opinion, it's going to save you more on gas than just using a traditional sensor anyway. Plus, you can't stop. Plus, people are using fan heaters in bedrooms, which is the big thing, really, for me. That's the big thing, is that when you put a controlled thermostat in like this, tenants go, F you, I'm going to go buy a heater now because my room's freezing, basically. And they'll have the window open, and they'll be sitting there in shorts and flip-flops with a fan heater using £1 a minute of your electricity. So I'd really look at zoning it into all the different bedrooms.
I tell the tenants to text me if they want any changes to the system. So I'll set it at a comfortable level. And I haven't had anyone yet text me to say, I have had a couple of people actually saying it's a bit cold, can you turn up the heating? Fine, I'll just turn it up a little bit. But apart from that, I tend to keep it at a comfortable level. But so far it has kept my bills down, probably by around about, I guess on average, around about £10-20 a month.
Okay.
On a small HMO, which, it all adds up. It's all, it's better to have it for cash flow in my pocket rather than, in somebody else's.
Okay,
and
cool.
The Inspire's only about 170 quid for the thermostat unit.
Like it. Right, I'm going to move on to how to run a HMO and basically to systemize it as well. So hopefully you can see the slides now. So basically, you might be using a letting agency, or you might be self-managing your properties, or you might be thinking about doing your own letting agency like I did. So if that's the case, then this subject's definitely for you. Just to highlight, after this subject, we're going to get on to some top tips, and then we're going to do a Q&A as well. So hang around for that, because that's going to be really good. So HMO management's actually quite simple when you're systemized. So most letting agencies shy away from HMO lettings. They think it's too much work. So this means companies like mine have done quite well. we're kind of swept up in our area with HMO lettings because the bigger companies don't want to do it. So I've got about 4 staff in my letting agency now, so we're doing quite well. But I'm totally online based, so we don't have an office. All my agents work from home. So whether you're self-managing or thinking of getting someone in to help with the management in your employed or self-employed, I've got a few ideas for you. So hopefully these will be useful. So I'm using property management software. So my management software that I use is Arthur Online. There's some other good software out there as well, but Arthur for me is the best one. So I find it to be very good. Some people still use spreadsheets. They put all the tenants' names on there, addresses, move-in and move-out dates, rent amounts, whether they've paid the rent or not, whether you've sent them the correct documents, etc., etc. Or you can automate it, so it makes life a little bit easier. So here's how we do it. So we advertise through Spare Room, which is pretty much a HMO industry standard, and we use Open Rent, which allows you to put your adverts onto portals like Rightmove and Zoopla. So I'll just go back to my video now so you can see me talking. So yeah, so we also use social media as a way of targeting potential tenants. Those are our main marketing portals. So Spare Room, Open Rent, and social media like Facebook. So a tenant will basically inquire about a certain property. We'll ask them a series of basic questions, such as when do you want to move in? Is it for you or a couple? Because most of our HMO rooms are for singles only due to HMO licensing, etc., etc. And that kind of comes down to kitchen facilities and number of bathrooms and communal space sizes. So you might have a 6-bed HMO that's licensed. That's a license for 6 people only. So you can't have couples. That's quite an important question for us when we get initial inquiries. So we enter their details into Arthur, such as their email address, which is important, and telephone number, and where they're viewing. So this starts an automation process now. So it will notify my agent, it will notify the person viewing as well, like the day before, an hour before, etc., etc. So my agents then book their viewings into Google Calendar, which we can all access in the team. So I can basically see what my agents are doing, which is quite important for me. So my agent will remind the potential tenant of the viewing, which is quite good because some people don't show up, basically. So the agent conducts the viewing, doing their best job to sell the room. My agents are on a nice basic wage, but they get paid nice bonuses for filling rooms as well, and hitting set targets, etc. So they're very motivated to fill those rooms. However, because they have to manage the ongoing tenant, they won't just put anyone in, because if they get a problem tenant now, actually take time away from them filling rooms, which is how they make their money. So I've essentially set up this system with my agents, payment system, bonus structure, etc., which works quite well for us. So hopefully that gives you a little idea on that one. So next, we go through a flow chart. So my flow chart, I'm just going to put up on the screen for you because I think it's a nice flow chart, if I do say so myself. So you should be able to see that on the screen.
Oh, that's a lovely flow chart there.
Thank you very much. So feel free to do a screenshot of this yourselves. So this is the flow chart that I made for my agents. So source tenant for your Spare Room and Open Rent, etc. Book viewing in, so block viewings if possible to save time. They conduct the viewing and explain the fees, etc. Tenant wishes to take room. They take the admin fee off of the tenant. Our admin fee is £200. Then they remove the advert from online. Or if it's on Spare Room, then they click that a room's been filled or whatever. They then start reference checks. So we use Let's Safe for our reference checks. So that's, I think it's £14 per reference check, but they do the credit check and reference check. And then we do the application form, which is done via Adobe eSign Manager. So Adobe eSign Manager is how we do all of our ASTs, application forms, everything's done through Adobe eSign Manager. And that means that we're totally paperless and online and cloud-based. So we don't have an office and we have no paper in the company. Once past reference checks and filled out application form, we then send them the EPC and the gas cert, how to rent, key rental document. So basically we don't take deposits, but we sell them a key for the duration of the tenancy, which is £30. And then we buy the key back off them at the end. Surprisingly, that makes most tenants leave the room in good condition. It's only £30, but you'd be surprised. And an ensuite pack as well. So most of our bedrooms have ensuites. So we send them a little pack where they can tick wherever they want, like toothpaste and, wash bag and all that sort of thing. We're trying to run it like a hotel. So things like the EPC and the gas are kind of legal requirements. You have to send that to them. And how to rent, that's a legal requirement as well. So you have to send that to them. Next, we get the ID, right to rent off them. So you've got to check their right to rent in the UK, so visas, etc. And we agree the moving date. Coming down, we send the tenancy agreement, again via Adobe eSign Manager. And then we move them in, and we do a check-off list when they move in. So the move-in check-off list will consist of things like showing them around the house, showing them where the fire exits are, showing them which kitchen cupboard's theirs, kind of explaining the house rules to them, and we also have to show them that the smoke alarms are working. So we show them all of those things, calculate rent, inform tenant, collect rent and deposits, ensure that all documents are safe to Arthur, ensure rent and deposits are paid with accounts team. So these are just a bit of back office admin checks, really. Check room, house, conduct the move-in, give welcome pack. So we do a welcome pack for all of our tenants. So in the welcome pack, it will include things like a welcome card with gift vouchers. We also give them a bottle of wine, a bottle of water. There's also a manual on how to operate the property, which is electronic. So that's like a little thing that we do. That's a nice touch, I think. And then we go to Arthur and we update the tenancy. Because when you put it on Arthur, they go in as prospective, and then you update it to a current tenant, for example. Again, that's just a bit of back office stuff. They get invited to Arthur, so the tenant can join Arthur as well. They can report maintenance issues through there, etc. And then you go to the final step. So it just kind of says, 11 docs should be saved in tenant folder, which is on Dropbox. We use Dropbox as well, and we also put it onto Arthur Online. App, how to rent, on Suite Pack, key rental, AST, reference checks, move-in checklist, inventory, ID, EPC, and Gasset. So that's that flow chart. So I hope that was good. And just a couple more things whilst I'm on it. So some other things we use as well, which help us systemize, is we use Infuma. So Infuma is a inventory software. So it's an app on your phone. So you go around, you take photos, you put little descriptions in, and each photo is geotagged with a latitude and longitude. And the date and time. So that's actually, it will hold up in a court of law. So that's really important. A lot of people aren't doing inventories. They're just, flagging it, or they're doing like a video, or they're just sort of like doing a crappy one on a bit of paper. It's no good. Like, you've got to do it properly. So using Fuma, it's £1 per report. Do it. You'll save yourself a lot of money in the future if you get a bad tenant, trust me. Another few systems, I'll let Julian talk in a minute. Another few systems, we have a lockout system. So we've got a key box outside the property that's got a front door key in. So if a tenant gets locked out and one of my agents are in bed, all nice and comfy, they can just say, yeah, the code is blah, 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 and they get in the property. And then we have a further system once they're in the property, like multiple lock boxes with more keys in for their bedrooms and things like that. If it is during the day, most of my agents will go around and let them in, which we charge them a fee for, which my agent keeps 100% of. So my agents quite like lockouts because they make more money. In case you didn't realise, I've employed people that like money deliberately, because I know what motivates people then, and it's easy to get them to work harder. That's kind of my top tips, really. So I just wanted to talk about, software, my flow chart. I wanted to talk about a lockout system. I wanted to talk about inventory app. I wanted to talk about the welcome pack as well. Welcome pack, nice little touch, etc., etc. One more thing before I forget. The cleaner, if you get a cleaner around your properties, which I recommend because it keeps your house in good working order, the cleaner is like the spy in the camp. The cleaner's there every week for us. She does a check-off list when she goes round. So she checks that there's no leaks under sinks. She checks security. She checks any damages in communal spaces. She checks the fire alarms as well. So she does all these things, and she reports maintenance issues back to the team. So we keep our properties highly maintained. My agents do carry out monthly inspections. However, if you've got someone there every week, that's your person on the ground. You should really utilise that. So that's it for me with regards to systemisation and management. Julian, you got anything to add?
Well, I kind of do things I'm very impressed, by the way. If this was actually a proper fight, I'd be floored by now. I would just be totally on the ground. So well done. Before I go on, can I just say hi to Michael? You're there, Michael. I can see you. Give me a wave, dude. He is the man of the hour. I just have to say that right now. Anyway, just moving on. A fantastic performance on Mastermind. Good bloke. So anyway, moving on. I was a letting agent back in, I don't even want to say how long ago it was. And the experience that I got from being a letting agent, basically, made me feel that I never ever want to get involved in lettings ever again. So I'm happy to do this stuff for myself so that I can be financially free and I don't have to work in property, because after 20 years working in property, I really don't want to work in property for that much longer. It's like money, are you going to work for money, or is money going to work for you? So for me, to be honest with you, it's a very fine line between property working for me and me working for property. So this is I guess the big difference between where you're coming from, where I come from. We were saying you've got a lot of years, to go before you get to my point. So for me, it's all about minimizing the amount of time you have to spend doing stuff at the properties and maintaining people. So I guess in a lot of ways, I'm similar to you. I don't have big properties. I don't have a massive portfolio. I have a very high performing portfolio that's cash flowing really well. So what I tend to do, first of all, is I will do my own viewings, because I do think that for me, durability of my product is down to the quality of the tenants I put in there. So I will vet my tenants, and I will create a product that beats everybody in my location. When it comes to what I'm putting out there on spare room and on open rent, no one is going to come close to me. No one has yet, and trust me, I'm going back to my first property to make sure that it is over and above everybody else. So the first thing I will do is make sure that when one of my rooms comes on the market, it is better than everybody else's in the area, in terms of quality, in terms of the images, in terms of style, in terms of design. It is the dog's bollocks. Yeah. So when people come around, first of all, if they call me and they're kind of like, okay, I want to have a look at the room kind of thing, then I just say, look, I've got lots of viewings. If I don't get the room let this week, I will give you a call. Let me take your details. So I will vet them verbally, first of all. Then I will check Facebook. If it's somebody that I've got a viewing, I will check social media to see if they are party people or not. I do not want ravers coming. I mean, I was the biggest raver of all. This is the worst thing in the world. I could out-rave anybody, but I don't want a raver in my house. So I'll take people that are responsible, got a good job, so on and so forth. Or, like, for example, I had someone that didn't pass the referencing, but she was a sous chef. So to me, a sous chef is a really hard-working person, and she's never there. She pays the rent, she's never there, etc. So I personally vet my tenants. I have very, very few voids. In fact, I don't get voids. What I do get is sometimes people move on, but very rarely. I was at a room today, and we worked out this girl had been in my house for 5 years. So, I will minimize churn by giving a really great service. In terms of systems, if I like the person and I think they're right for the room, I will pass it over to landlord referencing. And they charge, I think, it's 40 quid if you just want the basic checks. It's £100 if you want the basic checks, and then insurance for a year, landlord's insurance. Mm-hmm. And what that means is when they check the tenant, they send you, and they do it so quick. I don't know how they do it, but to me, it's a blessing having these people to check your tenants, because they do credit referencing, they do job referencing, they check landlords, etc. And they send you a report back. Anytime there's a change, they send you an email. But at the end of it, you get like an MOT certificate on a tenant. So it's got ticks. If everyone's got a tick, then they'll say, right, we can insure this person for a year, so that if they default on the rent, etc., we'll cover you and we'll chase them. And to me, I guess it's like anything. If you buy a car, if it's a faulty car, it's going to go wrong within the first month. Okay, you'll know if you've got a bad tenant really early on. So after about a year, I can make a judgment as whether I want to renew that insurance or not. But that gives me a good peace of mind. And only on one occasion have I gone against that referencing and made my own judgment on the tenant, because, like I say, she had a CCJ about 3 years ago, or whatever. But she was a sous chef. She's a hard worker, so I made that judgment call. So that's my system. I move them in myself. Mm-hmm. I do have, I have instruction booklets. I give a move-in pack, so things like toiletries, cereal, coffee, nice coffee. milk. That's just like I'm not gonna. I don't even know the name, but it's nice instant coffee, milk, the essentials really, and so that when they move in, they don't have to go running around for toilet paper, toothpaste, crap like that. So that's what they do. I make sure they've got a cupboard in the kitchen. I make sure they've got a shelf in the fridge. And everything is ship shape and Bristol fashion. And then they've got my details. The other thing that I do is have a really good team of contractors that I know are going to be reliable if I need to call upon them. So I've got people that can react. I've got a domestic appliance engineer. Domestic appliance engineer is probably the most crucial person of the whole lot, is a domestic appliance engineer. I've got a few girls in my properties, nothing against females, but they put stuff in a washing machine that, what the hell did you put that in the washing machine? Like, I won't even mention what goes in the washing machine, but freaking hell, the amount of times I've had to get the domestic appliance engineer, and he's sent me a picture back of stuff. What do you do? Domestic appliance engineer, gas engineer, boilers. They always go wrong on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or on some bloody day when you can't get hold of anybody. So that I've now put coded locks on my doors, changing everything, front doors over to coded locks. I personally don't like having the idea of key safes outside anymore. I just think that people can, you could probably get a crowbar or something and pull them off. Maybe you won't get into them, but I just don't like having that on show. So these coded locks eliminate keys. Inside the house, in a storage cupboard, each room has its own little key safe. So if a tenant loses their room key, the backup plan is, if I can't be around, they can go in, and the key safe inside the property is actually the same code as their individual code on the coded lock for the front door. So they can very easily let themselves in that situation. And then I've got a landlord buddy. So when I go on holiday, they look after my house. If there's anything wrong, they've got a list of all my people that I need to call, and they kind of look after things if I'm away, so that if there's a phone call, they take the phone call. And when they go away, I'm there. I look after their houses for them. So landlord buddy is what I've got. And I haven't gone this far yet, but I would say that a British Gas service agreement, if you can up your rent a little bit to cover it, I would say that is about 25 quid a month. I'd say that a landlord agreement with British Gas for servicing and maintenance of the boiler in case anything goes wrong, I would say probably is another way of you being able to manage your property on your own without that stress of the Christmas call out and so on and so forth. So there's that. Any other systems? I guess I'm happy to be a landlord. The good thing about being a landlord is it's a very easy way of making a living once you've got it set up. So I don't mind going and mowing the lawn. I don't mind fixing a little thing if I see something wrong, changing a light bulb if it needs changing. It's me being able to go to that house, interact with my customers, just make sure that my stuff is looked after properly. And like I say, initially I had a bit of a, oh, bloody hell, I've got to go and mow the lawn at this house, that house. But nowadays I'm getting a good income from these houses. And like I say, there are people that work months to get this kind of an income, or they'll be cleaning, there'll be cleaners, and they have to work their asses off. So, if I have to go to a house once a month, that's really cool by me.
I think you've got a really nice perspective on things, as in, like you say, you're getting good money, you're happy going around there. I mean, I like the way that you use the word customer. I mean, I feel that I'm in the hospitality industry rather than the property industry. When I'm doing HMOs, it's a different ball game, and I think that's why we're doing well, is because we take it seriously, we respect our customers, we treat our customers like I would want to be treated as a consumer. If I was paying for a service and it was not good, I would not be happy. I feel that landlords have had it really, really easy for years because of the supply and demand situation. There's loads of tenants going around. You don't really have to try hard. But I feel that now more people are doing HMOs. It's making things way more interesting. I actually am more excited now about HMOs than I was 10 years ago when I did my first one. And I was really excited back then when I did my first one. And that's because I love competition. So, but yeah, cool. I mean, I'll just bearing in mind, this is a Julian versus Nick webinar. Anyway, So, top tips.
Round 5. Can I just say about customers?
Yeah.
And this really got me when I first started going to networking meetings, and this was only about 3 years ago now, maybe 4, don't know, 3 years ago. And I'd hear so many people saying, you know what, I love investing in property, I just hate dealing with tenants. And I just thought, and I've been in business for a long time, and you know, I don't think if you're going to invest in property, it's any different to going into business doing anything else. And yet, with property, for some strange reason, a lot of people think it's something different, like you are a landlord, as if that's anything different to being a business person. I guess it's just the name for being the owner of a property business is I'm a landlord, but you are essentially a business person, and your business is renting property, renting rooms, etc. And your customers are essentially tenants. I don't like the phrase. I don't even like the word landlord, because, you know, when you kind of say I'm a landlord, you're a tenant. It kind of brings back the kind of, you know, going back to the Middle Ages where people had like a plot of land and you were the landowner and they were the little tenant on your backyard. It's the wrong, I think it's just the wrong word, the wrong phraseology to use when you're investing in property in a more advanced way. If you're just going to be buying a flat, giving it to a letting agent, fair enough, call yourself a landlord. But, you know, if you're going to be more hands-on, if you're going to be a little bit more business, if it's going to be more of a business, forget the name landlord, forget the word tenant, because they aren't tenants, they are customers. And you just got to look at them in that way. Once you do, it becomes a lot easier. You don't think, oh crap, I've got to go and deal with that tenant, this tenant. If you say I've got to deal with that customer, you think, how would I feel if someone had the same attitude to me if I was going into their business? You would very quickly fail. You would very quickly fail. And I think a lot of people fail for that reason.
There's other ways of making money through property where you don't actually have to have tenants. So if you don't like having tenants, then, you know, there's other ways of making money, basically, slash customers. But yeah, cool. I mean,
we've got a great question here.
That was
what about discussing big HMOs versus mini-mos?
We'll get on to that shortly, because we've got the Q&A at the end. But if we do the top tips now, so I'm going to give three, you give three, we do one each, and then we get onto the Q&A, and then the gloves are off, and we can argue over.
Yeah, cool.
Someone
said, "Are we going to have a rap battle?" I'm no good at rapping.
I'm quite good at rapping.
Are you?
Just so you know. So anyway, my top tip number one. So you probably hear this all the time, that location is key. And it is very key with a HMO, as you can imagine. But the thing I really want to talk about is not getting drawn into buying cheap properties. Now, cheap properties tend to stack nicely. They work better as an investment. And what I mean by cheap property is buying the crap houses in the crap locations because they're just cheap. You know, in practice, nobody really wants to live in them. I'll speak about that from experience. I've seen a lot of HMOs coming in on my local area over the last 6 months. And this has thrown some uncertainty into the market, such as, is the market oversaturated? However, 6 months on, and we're still letting our nice properties really easily. And that's because we're sourcing properties in right locations. We have had our occupancy rates knocked slightly, as you'd expect from having a huge influx of HMO rooms coming onto the market. However, you know, tenants quickly realise that the location and the management of that property is key. So they soon come over to us, as opposed to self-managed landlords who live away from the city, or they just can't handle the HMO management. You know, Julian is a self-managing landlord, and he's very hands-on and he's very good. I think he's got perspective, and he's humble and he's modest, and that's good for him. I think a lot of other self-managing landlords don't have those qualities, and as a result, they don't want to be bothered with tenants, and they look down on tenants, and they don't want to get their hands dirty, and they don't want to take responsibility. They just want the money. So it's all about money for them, and that's it. So, and that's why they buy the crappy houses. So I would kind of just advise, you know, buy the better houses in the better areas and expect to pay a bit of a premium for those properties. They're normally premium properties in premium areas because they're in the good locations where the tenants want to tend to live. There might be some exceptions to the rule, and you might be thinking of some now, like, well, I actually bought a really good house that was cheap, but I'm just generalising here. So that's my top tip number one. Julian?
Are we going to do top tips, or am I going to battle you on this particular tip?
Well, it's up to you, mate. I mean, you can respect my opinion.
Okay, I would say that location is probably a good top tip to have. I would, however, add something to that, is that when I was looking for property, I've also found that actually, and I've looked at the figures very recently, is that in the better locations where I am, the rental values have gone down. I have never bought properties in what you would call really high demand, really good locations, mainly because I've not had the kind of cash to invest in that kind of property. What I have done is I've looked outside of those areas to locations where there's good commute routes, stations, good employment in the area. However, the buying a property in that area is half the price as it is in the prime locations only a few miles away, but the rental values per room are exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I found, is that if you're very clever and you look around, yes, okay, I agree with you. If you really want a kind of guarantee that yes, there's going to be strong demand, you are going to have to pay for that. However, you can find good properties, good locations that are not as expensive, where the rental values are the same, but you're paying half as much. You just have to look really carefully. And I would suggest that get friendly with your local housing officer in the council and ask them what they think of an area before you buy, because they can tell you whether there's any social issues or whatever. I would always look for something which is, when you go to the street, feels right. I think that's the thing. It's got to feel right when you go to the street. It's got to be easy, within walking distance from transport. It's got to be near shops. It's got to feel safe. If you've got that, then I think those are the main things when it comes to location. I totally agree with you when you say about don't look for if it's cheap, it's going to be a bargain. Cheap is not a bargain. And I've found that cheap is never a bargain.
Mm-hmm. Excellent point. Excellent point. So if you know your market and you know your area, basically do loads of research. If you're buying in an area that you don't know about very well, do loads of research, because I found that people buy in just any old property, mainly through sources who say, yeah, that's cheap and it stacks really nicely and it's a good area. And then they buy it and it turns out it's not a good area. That's because they didn't do due diligence. They didn't do research. So
that could be tip number 2.
Well, I've just done tip number 2, but now I'll do my proper tip number 2 because it's a good one. So, oh wait, we've already talked about this. My tip number 2 was actually treating tenants like customers. But anyway, I'll just quickly touch on that again. So I actually carried out a survey across all my tenants, and this destroys me to actually admit, but en suites are at the bottom of their list of priorities. And I've based my whole business model around doing en suites. So I carried out the same survey on landlords on Progressive Property, and they all said en suite is the number one thing that they think tenants want. Tenants said that en suite.
Sorry. Can you repeat where you found that information? Where did you go? What was it? Who was it again? Was it Progressive?
Yeah.
Really?
So number one on their list was good property management. So all tenants want good property management. That's their main thing. So treat your tenants like customers, give them good property management. They'll stay for longer. You get the good ones, word of mouth, all that kind of thing. So that's my tip number 2. Oh, quick one. HMO Mummy says, how do I incentivize tenants to complete surveys? I didn't really. I just sent them all the survey, and they, I sent it to about 500 tenants, and 200 of them got back to me. So that's pretty okay for me.
Top tip 2. I agree with you.
Have you not got another tip?
Treat people with respect. Treat your tenants. They are your customers. So, if you treat people like they're valued customers,
mm-hmm.
you're doing the best you can with that. And I would say that's definitely number 2. Is treat your tenants are your customers. Treat them well, and you'll do fine.
Okay, cool. So my third and final tip, which I think is a decent one. Don't get drawn into negotiations too much when you're buying. a lot of people say you make your money when you buy. I agree with this completely, but it's when you're doing flips. If you aren't doing a flip, you're doing a HMO, and when you flip a property, you buy it cheap, you do it up as cheap as you can within reason, or not at all in some cases, and you sell it for more money. But you aren't selling a HMO, you're keeping the HMO for hopefully many, many years. That means that you need to think of it as a cash flow asset. You need to think of it over a 10, 20, 30-year period. So if that is the case, you would do it up to the best standard you can, right? You're going to be keeping it forever, so you want it to be done up to a good standard. You don't want to have ongoing maintenance problems. And you want to buy it in a good area as well. Either, you've discovered a new area, or it's an old school area that everyone knows is a good area, whatever. Point is that, when you are buying the property, some people will try and haggle over 2K, 5K, that kind of thing. And they'll actually lose out on the deal as a result. And when you're making cash flow over a 10, 20, 30-year period, haggling over 5K seems kind of stupid to me. And I've seen a lot of investors who, they're not thinking in this cash flow mindset, they're thinking in this flipping mindset. So ironically then, actually, they're taking 6, 12, 24 months to make their first HMO purchase. And as a result, they've lost out on that rental income, which is probably what they would have, if they just bought it for the asking price, they would have had the property going already. So my kind of point with my tip is that, if you're flipping a property, you want to buy it really cheap. You want to do it up, to a strict budget, and you want to sell it on for as much as you can. If you're doing a HMO, it's cash flow. Basically just get in there, buy it. Don't cry too much over a few £1,000s. You're going to be making cash flow on this bad boy for years and years and years and years. Hopefully for years and years and years and years. So you want it done up to a good standard. So that's my tip number 3. Julian?
Well, I'll give another tip, but I just want to add to that, is because I think a problem that a lot of people, not a lot of people, I think the problem that I've got with a lot of these training companies is that they tell people that you've got to find a BMV deal. Because if you find a BMV deal, you can refinance and pull all your money out and do it again. It's so ridiculous. I won't even go into why it's ridiculous. But what I would say to you is that I've seen people that, like you say, have taken 12 to 24 months to find the right deal because they were looking for something that was BMV. If they would have paid the market price 12 months ago and made the cash flow for that 6 or 8 months, they'd have made the same money back as they would have done if they would have been running around for 12 months to find that property, because time is money. So it's crazy. It just seems crazy. You've got to look at things from a cash flow perspective. Otherwise, you'll lose out and you won't get momentum. So, I agree with that one totally. But if I was going to give a tip on getting involved in property, it would be patient. Is have patience in everything that you do. Don't rush into stuff, because you need to give yourself time to do your due diligence. You don't want to be rushed by anybody. You don't want to feel under pressure, because a lot of this works on gut instinct. And if you put yourself under pressure, your gut instinct doesn't work. So you have to be patient. Don't get pushed into things. And I think that's the biggest. And I think if you want to go anywhere in business, if you want to do, if you want to push yourself forward, it can be very frustrating until you step back and you say, be patient. Let's just take a step back, be patient. It's going to happen, and calm yourself down, because I've been through it and it can be very stressful. So the thing that's always helped me is just to fall back on the thought that just be patient. It will happen. Be patient. So that's my top tip for anything, I guess.
I just wanted to say, yes, we are recording this, by the way, for everyone that's asking. So another thing to bear in mind is there's going to be a lot of noise, I think, over the next 6 months, as a lot of HMO rooms are hitting the market. There'll be a lot of noise around saturation, and I've found thus far that most of the noise that is coming from people who have bought the shitty houses in the shitty areas and done them up to a shitty standard, and now they're getting shitty tenants or no tenants at all. They're the ones that are generally creating the noise. And the HMO landlords that have gone out there and they've bought the good property, they've done it to a good standard, they've targeted the spec hit the correct target audience, they're filling their rooms and they're happy, and they're kind of not talking about it because they're just happy.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. I'm sorry to butt in, but if you look at market, sorry, and I didn't mean to butt in, Nick. Sorry.
No, I was finished.
Shall I let you carry on?
No, I was finished.
If you look at any saturated market, what most people do in business is gravitate towards the middle of the market. They create an average product. And as you were saying, there's a saturation of average product. If you look at the market, you can go on to Spareham and you can actually analyze the figures in any town you care to mention. There's a button on Airbnb which says price. If you click on that button, you instantly get an overview of the whole market from a price range perspective. And it works with HMOs, but on Airbnb, it's a visual graph. And wherever you go in the UK, the graph is the same. Loads of product in the middle. As the price drops, there's less product. As the price goes higher, there is less product. So in reality, what's happening is there are very few people that do it right and do it well. So they have less competition. There are loads of people that don't do it brilliantly, do it average, and they have loads of competition. And that's the same. That's why Apple, that's why Mercedes, that's why BMW create good quality product, because they don't have as much competition at that end of the market. That's why Ryanair, bless them, at the moment they're suffering. But that's why people like Lidl, etc., do really well, because there is less people doing what they do as well as they do it. The problem with going low end at the value end of the market is you've got to sell far more product to make the same kind of profit as, say, the likes of Waitrose or something, or Apple. They only need to sell one smartphone to make a big profit, whereas Samsung or HTC need to sell 5 products to make the same profit. So I've looked at this in detail, and people that complain about saturation, the only reason why they're doing it is because they position themselves in a part of the market where they've got loads of competition. What you've got to do when you're looking at getting involved in a market is analyze where all the competition is and avoid that sector of the market. Move into an area where there is less competition, and that's how you avoid that situation.
I like what you're saying about Apple, actually, because the mobile phone market was extremely saturated when Apple come along with the iPhone. And you saw what happened there. So I like that.
Well, if you look at them, and we are digressing, and I will just share with you the figures on this, is that Apple have only a very small percentage of the overall smartphone market in terms of number of sales. I think it's around about 15% of all the smartphones that are sold in the world are Apple products. And yet out of the whole market, Apple take over 75% of the profit. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens when you create a product that has got a high value and you're making good profit. And that's what I look at. I look at the profit model and creating a product that has no competition and so that I can make good profit. And with property, profit comes about by having less churn, less voids as well. So it's not just the rent that you charge, it's the consistency of keeping those tenants in your properties and keeping those properties let consistently over a long period of time. That's profit with property. If you're losing tenants all the time and you're having to get new tenants, you are losing profit. That comes off of your figures, and people don't put that into their numbers. So it's all about retention as well as upping your rent. For me, I don't charge top rents. I retain my tenants. I don't have churn. So that's another strategy of mine. But again, there's a lot of things that affect profitability, but with property, it's voids are the big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So awesome. So, we're going to go into a Q&A now. So just to recap, we've gone over HMO design. We've gone over technology in HMOs, systems and management. Me and Julian have just done some top tips for the last sort of 15-20 minutes. So now we're into the final leg of the webinar, which is going to be a Q&A. I personally haven't got a time limit for this. I don't know about Julian. I'll just keep going until I fall asleep. So I don't know about you, but I'm a bit of a night owl anyway. So
go for it.
If people want to leave at this point, it's cool. I won't be offended. if you've got
I can
questions,
see a couple of people falling asleep. I can see a couple of people falling asleep.
I'll shut up then and get on with the Q&A. So,
Shane is falling asleep. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to go over some,
Nobody moon at me, please.
I was gonna go over some, you know, hot questions that typically get asked, but we just kind of covered the saturation question, which is the big one that a lot of people ask me all the time about saturation. So I think we've kind of gone over that a little bit. I wanted to talk about, well, I want people to obviously fire questions in, and one of the questions that I had emailed to me earlier, and a question that I've seen a few people asking in the chat as well, is what do you think about en-suites versus non-en-suites? Because I have an en-suite model and you have a non-en-suite model, and we have been known to argue quite a bit about this on Facebook. I think we kind of concluded that neither of us were right or wrong in a way, because it's kind of market and area dependent.
I was just being polite, Nick.
But we can go over that now. So you can start off, mate. So obviously, tell us about your model and about why you think non-en-suites work over en-suites.
Okay. You're putting me first. That's not good. But as you're the boss, I'll go first. Okay. Why don't I think en-suites are there are so many reasons. The first thing is I've been converting properties to HMOs for quite some time. That's not a reason, by the way, because that doesn't mean that things now are the same as they were 10 years ago. But I've never put them in if they're not necessary. And it's never been an issue with me. And I've always, with properties, managed to secure. If I've done refurbs for other people, if I've done conversions for other people, the reason why I got so much work renovating properties was because the properties that I converted always got higher than average, higher than they kind of broke the rental ceiling for that area. So I would get people coming back to me saying, Julian, you did a great job for so-and-so. Can you do a refurb for us? Can you do an HMO conversion for us? And I never did en suites. I focused on other things, on putting more quality into other areas. Never put them in. It never affected letting, and it never affected demand. The other reason being is I was actually, and I'm going to tell you a little story, and I've tried not to be too long about it, but I do a lot of work in Headingley in Leeds. Now, Headingley has got a really big student population, and one day I was contacted by a bloke who was, I would say, a wealthy man, and he had his daughter was one of these girls that obviously had everything given to her, and she said that, you know, daddy was going to buy a house this year and he wanted to do it up for next year, and she said it's got to be the same as the house that I'm living in right now because it's the most exclusive student property in Headingley, and I just want to have the same thing. So I went round to have a look, and yes, it was a gorgeous house. The landlady who owned it was several houses in a row, had obviously, this woman had incredible, impeccable taste. You walked in and these houses looked like they were out of a Vogue magazine. They did not have en suites. They had all wooden floors. They had a 40-year-old kitchen in them that had been updated higgledy-piggledy. And I thought these houses, number one, I thought these houses have got to be freezing in the winter. And I said to tenants, is this house cold in the winter? And one of the girls turned around to me and said, yeah, in the winter, it's bloody freezing. We've got to wear duvets when we walk around the house. I said, well, why do you rent it out? She said, because it's the most beautiful house we've ever seen. So to me, and I've been a estate agent, I've been a letting agent, I've been a sourcing agent. I've done this for a long time. Good design, something that really stands out and has got the wow factor, trumps everything. En suites are nothing to do with rental demand at all, especially when it comes to HMOs. To me, I've never put them in and they've never made any difference. And when I've posted onto Facebook about this, the same thing comes up again and again. And I get loads of landlords coming on saying, we've never put in en suites and we never have an issue. The other thing I've done is I've looked on Spare Room when I've done some research for clients looking at design specification. And I've gone in and done advanced searches looking at certain areas, finding out what percentage of the tenants are looking for en suites in that area. And whenever I've looked, it's been a absolutely minuscule percentage of people looking for en suites in any particular area. So I have never specified them. And I've had people go against me and they've come a cropper because council have banded them as a band A on their individual bandings. And that's another reason is councils, if you give them any reason to go charging extra, they will do. And I think that they're looking at en-suites, they're looking at kitchenettes, and even if it doesn't have a kitchenette, it's got an ensuite, they'll say, I'm sorry, but that's a self-contained room. We're going to chuck a council banding on it. So it doesn't bother me if people want to go and putting in en-suites, because I think they're just going to come up a cropper. The final thing is, when that does happen, what's going to happen is the value of that product is going to drop significantly, because no one is going to want to buy an HMO with en-suites if it's not a competitive product. If tenants have to start paying council tax, or if a landlord has to pay a council tax, you're going to find people are going to regret putting them in, and they're going to have to take them out, or they're going to want to take them out. And anyone that's put them in is going to have a big white elephant. So that is why I don't like en-suites. I will put them in if the layout demands it. That's it. And people say, yeah, we get a premium. They'll have a premium for now, maybe. But I'm also a qualified plumber, not a gas engineer. I'm a qualified plumber. And to me, en-suites are a big failure point. And going back to durability of a product, bathrooms in a property are the big failure point. They get a lot of use and abuse, and they're going to cost big money when it comes around to doing refurbs and upgrades. They're going to last about 10 years max. So you've got to have the money in 10 years' time to redo a hell of a lot of properties with en-suites. And those properties are better gone up in value. Otherwise, you're going to be screwed. You're going to have properties that you cannot refurbish because you can't afford to bring them up to spec. That is my reasons for not going for en-suites. It's never been an issue.
Yeah, I mean,
and I've had somebody say, how many people? No more than 3 per one unit. I've actually had more than that, but I personally would not have more than 3 per unit. I would have to put a shower in, but it would have to be another shared facility. I would not close off a shower room.
yeah, so I mean, you know, like I say, we've had this discussion quite a few times before, really, through Facebook, etc. You know, my opinion is that every point you've made is absolutely bang on. Cost for maintenance, cost of putting it in the first place. You know, you're talking 2.5 to 3 grand per ensuite. That adds up when you're doing a 6-bed, 8-bed HMO. It's thousands, and then you've got to upgrade the heating system as well. So, you know, I totally buy into everything you're saying. But I also think that it's not as easy as that. I think when the market dictates that you need an ensuite because of where you are, because that is the norm.
But you've done a check. You've done a check.
I agree. I have done a check, and I am going to do some HMOs without ensuites and see what happens. But your model is small HMOs. Your model is the Minimo model, the 3-bed, 4-bed HMOs. My model is to do 27-bed HMOs. You know,
yeah, that's a different product. But I can quote Paul Lanfear, who's a friend of mine, who's been doing HMOs in Leeds. He also does not do en-suites, and I've done refurbs for him, done up HMOs where in the same location there are properties with HMO with en-suites. If you've got the money, like, you're obviously doing a good job and you're dressing them beautifully. What I found is a lot of people that put in en-suites run out of money at the end, and they don't have a lot of money to go putting into the dressing items and putting in quality elsewhere. If you compromise anywhere when you put in en-suites because you've run out of money for other things, that is when it becomes an unviable proposition. Mm-hmm. If you've got the money to do everything, fine. Mm-hmm. If you don't put them in, because I've found that it doesn't make the product any more competitive. It doesn't give the value. And like I say, rooms that I've done have made just as much, if not more, than competition where they've had en-suites and we haven't. And that's consistent for many years. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me was the council tax banding potentially coming in. Now, I've got my own opinion of that. I've spoke to the environmental health officer at the local council, who's my go-to guy, and I'm quite friendly with him. You know, I asked him about things like mandatory licensing, council tax banding per room. He kind of laughed and said, that's a good joke. There's only me and 2 other people in the whole department. How the hell are we going to do 1,000-odd licenses? And we're expected to do it like that as well. They're going to bring it in. We've got to do the licenses in a day, sort of. You know, so it's not going to happen. He said, council tax banding per room. He said, we're struggling at the minute to just sort out the current council tax that we've got with the current people that live in the city, let alone having another, you know, 10,000, 20,000 HMO tenants. Because all the landlord's going to do is say, right, mate, you pay the council tax now. You're the tenant. They're going to go to the council and say, here's all the ASTs that you've requested. Go chase them yourself. It's your problem, not mine. basically. I'm not going to chase them for you. Here's the address. You know what their name is. Send them a letter. See what happens. The tenants ain't going to bloody pay it. They're just, look, most of my tenants are foreign. They're just going to go back to their own country after 6 months, 12 months, and they're not going to pay the council tax. And I think the council will try to implement it. I know they've implemented it in other cities already. I think some people have successfully fought against it and won as well, because of the whole, it says it needs to be an ensuite and or kitchenette as well. And some councils have taken that as an ensuite, right, council tax bandit. So there's a lot of grey areas around that. But for me, that was a big thing where I went, right, shit, I've been telling people to do ensuites for years. I've been doing ensuites for years. And now I've shot myself in the foot a little bit. So, I try to be humble. I try to learn from things, and I try to see what's going on and listen to people like yourself and see what you're doing and see that you're doing it successfully. So at the end of the day, I can't sit here and say you're wrong, because you're clearly not, because you're doing well out of it.
Going back to product,
mm-hmm.
and I'll finish because I've obviously won this argument. So if we go to Apple, they've just released computers where there's only one USB-C port on the side, and they're charging double pretty much what everyone else charges for their computers. Going back to being innovative, I think if you can be innovative with what you're doing, you don't have to do the same as everybody else and just copy what everyone else is doing. Try to innovate. You don't have to put in en-suites, but you do have to try and innovate. So that's the hard part. If you can't be innovative, then you're going to have to use the en-suite method to try and make your product that bit more in terms of cash flow. But you've got to be prepared to pay the price for doing it, which is the initial installation cost, the maintenance cost, and the refurb cost at the back end.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. I'd rather innovate than imitate.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So Fiona's asking 3 and 4 beds and 27 beds are basically two extremes. It's like comparing apples to pears. A few people.
It is. They're totally different products.
We're basically arguing about something, but we're kind of not really doing the same things. So
I would agree. If it's a larger HMO, then they need to be self-contained.
Up to what
but then
point,
I would say,
up to what point? Someone says 6 to 8 beds. What do you think? 6 to 8 bedroom HMOs. What do you think, Julian?
I would never go for an 8-bed HMO.
If you did, though, would you?
I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. And the reason being is because I think you're stuck halfway between one and the other.
Yeah.
The problem that I've got with the larger HMOs, and I think a lot of people that are doing commercial to residential at the moment, you accepted, are going to really find themselves in big difficulties, because I think as the market matures, you're going to get some really well-financed players coming into the market in these more popular locations, putting in blue chip, ultra high spec, ultra tech, everything built into these things, multi-room HMOs that are just going to eat up everybody. They're just going to suck up everything. And all these people that have done fairly kind of okay commercial to residential projects, they're going to empty because they're just not up to that standard. People really, to be truthful, don't really want to be stuck in a bedroom where, they don't want to come home after a day's work and just be stuck in a tiny little bedroom with an ensuite and not have anything to do. That's really depressing. And yeah, they might have to share a kitchen with 8 other people, but to me, that really is depressing. It's like being in a hostel. Mm-hmm. That is not what I want to create. I do not want to create a hostel. I don't think there's a future in that kind of product. As you start going over 6-bed, it then, to me, after a couple of years of use, these things look like hostels. So I would never get involved at that level.
What do you think the future is then?
The future? Are we going to start talking about the future of HMOs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, depending on where you've purchased. So I think if you've purchased in a big city, the future of HMOs is stuff like the studios that are coming into London. Really, I guess I don't know how to describe them, but you just have to call them. They're, like what's happened with the student blocks. Mm-hmm. So in the student market, you've now got much larger, big blocks of really nicely put together student accommodation where everything is laid on. They've got convenience stores, they've got gymnasiums, they've got cinemas, they've got little rest areas. They're just fully kitted out. to the point where you can go in and you've got a little tablet and you can say, I want house cleaning, I want this, that, and the other. And it's just absolutely everything is laid on, and it can be done on people are doing them on service kind of period. So you'll go in for a week or a month or however long. They are just spot on for people that just want instant, they just want to move into something that is just, everything is laid on for them. That is why I think it's going at the high end. If you've got a good quality house, which is a really nice shared house, where when you go in, it feels like a home, then you can compete with that kind of product. If you've got anything else where you walk in and it's like being in a hostel where, it's just a little room with an ensuite where you get home, you cook yourself a baked beans in the kitchen that half a dozen people share, all their washing's out, it's never tidy. The corridors have got bikes in them and people are left crapping, I've seen it that many times. Those are the product that is going to fail. And those are the products that you're not going to be able to get rid of. So I think that is the big problem. And I would never get involved in it. And I've seen it in the student market. They're just a nightmare. You cannot get rid of them. So I would just say anything above a 6-bed, be careful. You've got to think, is this going to look like a hostel? And how is this going to compete with people coming into the market that have got an amazing product where it's got a cinema, it's got a gym, it's got this, that, and the other, and it's the same price? Mm-hmm. In London, the studios, I think they're charging £200 a month over the average. Mm-hmm. And the rooms are absolutely tiny because they've created these great shared spaces. So their model is shared space. The same with Stuart Scott that's doing stuff in Brighton. He's talking about shared co-living. In America, it's called co-living spaces, or cotels, they started calling them. Just look up cotels. It's all about co-living, shared spaces. And this is why I've said en suites for me, that I don't worry about them because I've created good shared spaces. I think that's the key to it. If you've created great shared spaces, I think you're okay. If you haven't, you got a problem.
There is obviously people though that want to just have their own space, isn't there? They don't want to live in.
That's more blue collar. That's more. And I've seen this. That this tends to be people like maybe people that have got maybe cleaners, blue collar workers. They're the kind of people that want a room on their own. But even then, it's got to be quite a large room, not a tiny little cubby hole with an ensuite where you can't swing a cat. You've got to look at the space carefully and have that space for them. And if it's blue collar, then I would go in at the low end. I wouldn't be going in at such a high spec. I would be looking at making it really durable and not looking at making it look like a boutique hotel. I would make it what it is, a good value product aimed at blue collar workers, not at the ultra high professional end where they're going to be wanting, a running machine and a bloody whatever. So I would be very careful about market positioning in that case.
So the feedback I've had from people that I've asked, i.e. tenants, what they think about co-living, I've said, would you prefer to have a very small bedroom, but then to have a super duper gym, cinema, massive kitchen, etc., or would you rather have a bigger bedroom? And the general feedback was, I prefer to have my own space. I prefer to have my own bedroom. I don't really want to live in a HMO. I have to live in a HMO because I can't afford to have my own house, or I'm new to an area, I don't know anyone, or whatever. The various reasons as to why people actually live in HMOs. Now, co-living is telling people this is what you want. You want a small, tiny bedroom, because all the co-living I've seen, the bedrooms are very small, literally on the minimum requirements. And the reason is that they're kind of saying, you don't want to be in your bedroom, you want to come in here and sleep, and then you want to go sit in these spaces that we've made for you. And the idea is, in my opinion, awesome. I love it. I love the idea of it. However, the feedback I've seen from people, and if you go on these articles about co-living, all the comments are like, this is a shit idea. I'd hate to live here. This is disgusting. I live in a co-living. I hate it. And this is the kind of feedback that
Yeah, but you didn't ask me whether I was going to invest and I was going to do a co-living accommodation. You asked me what I thought the future of HMOs was. Mm-hmm. And I think the future of HMOs is that if you want to compete, I think that's where the market's going. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of people investing in co-living properties. And if you've got a crappy HMO, which feels like a hostel, people would much rather live in a co-living space than in a crappy HMO.
I agree.
If you've got a nice shared house, then you will compete with those big players because you're offering something that they don't, which is a really nice, spacious, shared accommodation. But it mustn't be over 8 bed. It mustn't be. It mustn't not have a living room. The bedrooms can't be too small because then you won't compete. For me, I've always looked at good shared spaces and good room sizes, and not too many rooms. So that's because I'm thinking in the future, my product is different to the really big players that are coming into the market. I can compete with them on a totally different level. So that is why I do not look at these kind of medium-sized, quite large houses where they've taken the living room out, they've put en suites in, there's no shared spaces. It's just a load of rooms around a corridor that is just going to look crap after 5 years, and it's just not going to compete with what is coming. And you've got to look at what's coming, and this is the thing. So that's the future, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, we've seen historically where big companies have come in and they've built big student blocks, and everyone said, right, that's the end of the student market round here. But actually it wasn't, because tenants turned around and said, I don't want to live in this big block. I want to live in a house with my 3 other mates.
Well, this is the thing. I've looked at the student market, and what's happened in there, and you've got to look at this in a positive way, is that when these blocks have come in, what they've done is they've increased the rental ceiling. So the room rates for good quality rooms goes up because these people charge a lot more for a room than everybody else did. But what I found is that people with really good quality student houses have been able to ride off the back of that, charge more rents, and been able to keep filling their rooms because they have a great product, which is why I've said to you, with HMOs, you've got to have something that's good to offer people. And that's why I've gone for the kind of smaller HMOs. But like I said, that if you've got a 6-bed, it's got to be a nice house. Some people have said, well, the tenants don't use the living rooms. I've not found that, and if they don't, fair enough. But I don't have a problem getting rooms filled, and I don't have a problem keeping tenants, and never have done. And that's because I focused on the shared spaces as well as the bedrooms. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So I mean, so it really is like, where are you in the country? What's your market? There's loads of questions around it on what's good and bad, and etc. etc. But I mean, obviously the question was, what do you think the future of HMOs is? And you answered it, which is co-living. And I agree with you totally. I think co-living is going to be where everyone's going to go. And I think that people are going to tell tenants what they want. They're going to tell them they want that, rather than asking them, basically, because that's what innovators do. They tell the customer.
Yeah, but there are always going to be people that want to just live in a nice place and don't want to live in a rabbit run where they're being told what to do and being shoved into a tiny little bedroom. Just take advantage of that fact if you're investing in it, because I think HMOs are great. I think they're a really great cash flow strategy. You've just got to be ahead of the game and just think 2 years, 5 years ahead.
Okay, cool. Right, let's see what other questions we've got. I mean, we've had loads of questions, and
someone's talked about not increasing rents.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Another thing that I think is important is that you've got to keep pace with what the market is doing. So when I started investing in property, I finished my first house on my birthday, December 21st, and I didn't think I'd actually find a tenant. I filled that house by the end of the first week in January. There was Christmas in the way. It filled really quickly, and I kept the tenants for a long time. When I go onto spare room, there's double the amount of rooms of properties available in that area now than there were 3 or 4 years ago. So you've got to look at pricing as well as looking at other things. And what I've done is, what I've noticed, and when I've done my research on the number of people that are looking in my area, is there aren't very many people looking at the top end of the market. Most people are looking slightly below the top end. So in my area, the top end is about $450 a month. That is the absolute top for a room, $450 a month. Mm-hmm. And there's quite a few people that have come into the area, created these really great products with en suites, etc., and they're sticking them on at $450 a month, and they're sitting there. I'll shove something in at $395 without an ensuite, and it will go within 2 to 3 weeks before the previous tenant has gone. It will shift. I do not want to have an empty room. So if you've got a room that's at $450 a month and it's empty for 2 months, then I will not be able to sell it. 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 I will and I've got a room at 395 that fills before the tenant leaves, I'm making more profit.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to look at that as well when you're looking at, you know, your profit margin. If a room is empty for a month, you've lost £400. In fact, you're making a loss, because if that room is empty, it's costing money. You're losing money if that room is empty.
Mm-hmm.
So filling that room and making a profit is much more important to me than having empty rooms. And you've got to factor that into your pricing. So our price where there's more people looking, and rather fill that room than put it on at silly money where there are very few people actually looking, and you've got to wait around for the fish to bite on the hook.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got to load that hook with stuff that the fish are gonna come in, pile in, and you can basically, you know, feed yourself for a good period of time rather than go to a place where there's no fish.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Okay, cool. Well, I'm kind of thinking we should wrap it up, because we're an hour and 35 minutes in now. So I kind of want to go to bed at some point. I'm knackered.
There's one last question. Somebody said last question.
Go on. What is it?
I don't know. John said last question. There we go. But that's okay. Are you going to bed? You're a lightweight.
I've had a long weekend, mate. I was on a mastermind barge trip, so I'm still on sleep.
So John said, what kind of cash do you leave?
Or extract all cash. Well, that depends if you're doing commercial. I mean, if you're doing commercial to residential, or you're buying like a 3-bed, 4-bed house and you're going to convert it sui generis, change of use, you're going to get a HMO license on there, you're going to get a commercial reval, you know, you're going to pull a hell of a lot of your money back out. That's going to allow you to momentum invest and buy more. So my strategy around doing larger HMOs gets me pretty much all my money back out of each deal, and it allows me to expand much quicker. Whilst obviously if you do, I don't want to speak for Julian, but my experience of doing the mini HMO model, which is what I started off with, that was my entry into the market. I was leaving a lot of money in those deals, which is okay, because you know, that's healthy. Leaving money in is healthy. Getting all your money out in a big mortgage isn't necessarily healthy, especially on large HMOs where it hasn't got many exit strategies. You know, it's more subject to market changes, whilst mini HMOs can be converted back into buy-to-lets quite easily and sold on. So, you know, my way is more risky and it will make you grow quicker, whilst I think Julian's is more steady. But like I said, I don't want to speak for him because his market's different to mine. But I found with a mini HMO, I was leaving loads of my money in. You know, I was buying it probably for 60k, spending 20k doing it up, and it was probably worth you know, 80k when I was finished. So not much more than what I bought or spent on it, basically. Whilst with my commercial reval HMO model, you know, I'm buying things at 120, I'm spending 60k on them, 6 bedrooms, 7 bedrooms, all en suites, and they're getting refouled at 240, 250k. So you're getting, you know, big chunk of your money out then, and you can go do another one. Julian?
It's a very good question, and I think, like you say, there are different ways of thinking about this. For me personally, and I'm not knocking you at all, because that is one way of doing things, and there's no right or wrong with this. I do think the only wrong is if you over leverage yourself and you borrow too much at the compromise of profit. For me, I'm interested in long-term, secure profit. So I do leave a lot of money in the deal. I have looked at refinancing different things, and every time I've looked at this, it's like I can only give you the analogy of a set of scales. So if you borrow on one side, the scales tip one way. When you put money into another one and you kind of start borrowing for another one, and you start pulling money out, your cash flow goes down on one only so you can make a bit of more cash flow on another. So it kind of sometimes balances itself out and you make nothing. You're just acquiring more properties, or you might be making maybe half as much profit as you thought you did, because you're leveraging one property to get the deposit and the money so you can get another property, and then you're going to get another loan, and therefore all that borrowing adds up. So for me personally, like I say, I've been kind of suffering, put as much cash as I can into these properties so that I'm getting much more cash flow, and that cash flow is secure. and I would like to bring these mortgages down so that as I get older, I have more options. And because, ultimately the ideal situation for me is to make cash flow now. And then as I need it more, as I get older and I don't want to work as much, I will rely more on that cash flow. And I don't want to have too much borrowing to pay back. So I don't have to compromise on that cash flow into the future. So for me, it's just doing a bit of suffering right now, but with the knowledge that, yeah, I can't go out and buy myself a new Audi or whatever it might be that I would like to get. I don't go on as many holidays as I'd like to go on. I've got kids to put to university, etc. That all has to be paid for. So my priorities right now are getting the kids through university, paying all their freaking hell, what the amount of bloody money that's all going to cost. All that sacrifice has to come from somewhere. So these assets are paying for this stuff, paying for my kids' education, paying for the odd holiday that I might like to take, and paying for the fact that I don't have to stress out if I don't have a good month this month or a good month next month. And also it's giving me the peace of mind that in the future, as I get to older and I don't want to work as much or I want to do other things with my time, I've still got that cash flow coming in and I don't owe loads of money. So I'm kind of the opposite way, but it does involve sacrifice. But I read a really good book actually is The Richest Man in Babylon. And I guess I'm kind of following what it's saying in The Richest Man in Babylon is, and I heard another thing as well is, if it loses its value, lease it. If it gains money, if it gains value, then buy it for cash if you can. So if you read Richest Man in Babylon, if you kind of look at the kind of really, really successful people in property, they normally have very successful businesses, and they use the money that they've made from their successful businesses and pile it into property. And as much of that property is owned cash as they can, as they put as much cash into it as possible, because then that income is theirs. It doesn't go to the bank. So for me, it's not about pulling money out. It's about keeping it in, keeping that cash flow and securing that asset for the longer term. So that's where I'm at. And not everyone can afford to do that. Not everyone has that luxury, but be very careful when you start borrowing money to make money, because are you actually compromising profitability? You get a lot of people saying, I've got a massive bloody portfolio. Well, that means absolutely sod all, because I don't give a shit about turnover. The only thing I give a crap about is profit. And that's where we talk about design. The reason why I'm so focused on design is because it makes me more profit. It's just about profit, long-term profit.
Well, they say, don't they, that turnover's vanity whilst profit's sanity. So
absolutely. I'd rather have one really good performing product than a million products that make sod all.
Yeah.
And I've seen this happen. So
cool. Right. Well, we'll end it there. Few quick plugs before we end. Visit my website, www.pegasuspg.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do loads of cool videos. And I've also got another webinar with Sarah Poynton Ryan, we're going to be focusing on sourcing property. And she's super, super knowledgeable on sourcing property. Julian, any plugs?
I'll plug you, Nick, because I have a huge amount of respect for what you're doing. And so, fantastic. I've really enjoyed today. If I was going to say anything, it would be that I do workshops. I teach investors. And I've actually had somebody call me yesterday, a guy called Amir Safdar, who I work with, who won, I think it was one of these great prestigious awards at one of these, not Tigrant, I don't think they're called Tigrant anymore, but he won kind of best deal or whatever. I've had Kevin Edge, he won an award. I've had Dan Newbold, he's won an award. It seems a lot of people that come through my training, the interior design training, I've had a lot of award-winning people come through, and I've had another great result this month. So I teach investors how to become great designers, how to create great product. And if anyone is interested, then my website is iconliving.co.uk. And I've got one coming up in Maidenhead. I'm not doing any more down south after this one. One in Maidenhead, and I've got one coming up in November in Wetherby, and that's the last one I'm going to be doing. And if I give people a discount code, if they enter this code in when they buy a ticket, it knocks the ticket down by £200. So the discount code is design1, capital D, design and the number 1. And if you enter that in the promo code, you get a discount off the tickets. And that's me. I do these lovely workshops and everyone's recommended them and I give it 1,000,000%. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Nice one. Thanks for that. And just one final cheeky plug before we end. I run a business community called Unity Project. So it's for property developers, it's for property investors. And we do monthly in-person meetings where we get seminars from experts. And we also do masterminding. And because it's a community, we've got JV opportunities going on there. It's got about 36 members at the minute. We're 2 months in so far. And yeah, you know, it's going really well. So I'd love to have you part of Unity Project. It's £50 for the first month. It's half price. And then if you don't like it, you can leave. If you do like it, it's £100. Most people have stayed because they see the content, you know, the value for money in it, basically. So
can I just say how amazing value that is?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
I've seen what other people are doing, and they're charging masses more than that. So I would just say that is really good value for what that is. It's essentially like a mastermind.
Yeah, I mean, all the speakers that we have are really top notch. You know, so some of them are really cool. So yeah, check it out. I've posted the link, unitycommunity.co.uk. That'll take you to the website. You can check it out. Check out Julian's website, iconliving.co.uk. Use that discount code. Go along to one of his workshops where he does in-depth interior design.
And project management. And project management.
And just a quick one on the recording. We have recorded this. I've got everybody's email addresses. Julian's recorded it as well. So
I stopped it actually. Can you send me the recording as well?
Are you happy for me to email everybody the recording?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's your recording.
Well, yeah, but I like to ask. So, you know, yeah, I'll send the link to everybody. It'll probably be in a day or two. I've got to upload it to YouTube. It's about 2 hours long, so it's going to take forever. So give us a few days grace and I'll get it over to you. Cool. Right, okay, let's end it there. Thanks very much, everybody. Hope you have a good evening. Hope everybody enjoyed that. Feel free to share it on Facebook and how great it was and how great we are. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nick. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.